week, and what an honor to be in front of you guys here today. And I want to share with you guys today my journey of becoming a caregiver. Now, I know if you're sick, lying in a hospital bed, and needing help with your care needs like dressing and toileting, having this former offensive lineman come in to help meet those intimate needs of yours, may not make you feel the most comfortable. I'm not quite the picture of a person that people have in their mind when they think of a sweet, loving caregiver. But despite this, it is a caregiver who I'm aspiring to become. This is not some ploy or some marketing tactic. Learning to embody the love of a caregiver has become my spiritual practice, and as this community would call it, my hero's journey. See, I believe at the core of who I am lives a caregiver, and I am learning how to give him to the world. I want to share with you how I've arrived at this conclusion by sharing you my life story in three major sections: my identity as an athlete, my identity as a business owner, and how these two phases of my life was preparing me to step into the identity I'm currently evolving into, my identity as a caregiver. When I was young, I only had one goal, and that was to become a professional athlete. And there was really not a backup plan. I was able to live that dream. I played center for the Green Bay Packers and the St. Louis Rams, but I don't have any fancy statistics to share with you. While other positions can say, here's how many yards I ran for, or here's how many tackles I had. An offensive lineman's only measurement of success is pancakes. And I had a lot of them, as you can tell, on and off the field. My only really accomplishment in the NFL that is noteworthy, that is, as a center, I had two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Brett Favre and Kurt Warner, who both had their hands up my ass. Most people think that professional athletes are just gifted with talent. And from my experience, that wasn't true with me. My career started on the 8th grade B team. And when I was struggling with that, my father took me to a local restaurant to try to console me a little bit and said, Andy, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do of becoming a professional athlete. But I was unwilling to accept that answer, and I was ready to do whatever it takes. As examples of this, when I was in middle school, the most popular and the best college football team at the time was the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Pains me to say that a little bit. But they were known to have the best and the most aggressive weightlifting program. Somehow I got my hands on that program, which is quite surprising because the internet wasn't even invented at that time, but I got my hands on their weightlifting program, and I did that program religiously in middle school, and I did it by myself. When I was in high school, I thought I needed to be pushed harder, so I contacted the coach of a local college team and asked if I could train with them. By the end of the year, I'd beaten all the other offensive linemen in college in an Olympic lifting competition. Early on, I had a relentless drive to pursue greatness, and I was ready and willing to do whatever it takes. When I got to college, I met the person who challenged my will to a breaking point. I had the opportunity to play at Kansas State and for Hall of Fame coach Bill Snyder, who actually just announced his retirement this week. It was here that I was introduced to grit and perseverance. K-State was an extremely demanding atmosphere, and we were pushed to our limits every day. It's more of a military-style environment. I had my father on the phone multiple times wanting to quit, but I couldn't imagine leaving my friends behind, so I persevered and didn't give up. I ended up having a very successful career. I had a lot of accolades in college and had the opportunity to live my dream of being a professional athlete. And on the day I signed with the Green Bay Packers, I took my father back to that same restaurant he took me to when I was struggling being on the 8th grade B team. And I said, "Hey, Dad, you remember that one time you took me here and you said that I had a better chance of winning the lottery than I do becoming a professional athlete. And like a lot of you guys, he was like, no, I don't remember that. And I'm like, well, I do. And I'm buying dinner today. I'm paying for it with my NFL contract. So that one felt good to say. See, my dreams were never handed to me. What I learned during this stage of my life is that if you want something, you got to be willing to do what it takes to get it. You have to be willing to do what most only desire to do. You have to care more than others think reasonable. You have to care the most. And these lessons that I learned as an athlete weren't just so I could live my dream of being a professional athlete. Unbeknownst to me at the time, they were introducing me to the fierce will it takes to be a caregiver who is willing to do whatever it takes for those that they serve. The second phase of my life story that I'd like to share with you is my identity as a business owner. My journey to move on from my days as an athlete started when I got a call to adventure. In 2004, I was in my third season in the NFL. Things were going great. I was in a good position on the team. The starting center was retiring, which was the position I was being groomed for. This was my year. And then one day, my brothers came to visit me, and over dinner, they told me that Dad was getting sick and was needing to step out of the family business. And they asked me to step in and fill that void. Much to their surprise, I said yes, right in that moment. I made that decision to pursue meaning, as I'd come to feel the NFL was a life that was just about me. So I walked away from the NFL to pursue a more meaningful and purposeful life. My agent and my coaches and my friends all said I would regret it. Nevertheless, I made the decision and transitioned from beating up 300-pound grown-ass men every day to serving the needs of the frail elderly. And now today, I'm in the senior living business. And when people find that out, they say, man, what a great business to be in. You know, there's this big age wave that's coming, and that business must be booming. And I get this feeling that people view me as though riding this big age wave all the way to the bank and cashing in on it and being real successful. But the reality is, this has been far from my experience. You see, my father was a brilliant entrepreneur and a pioneer in the assisted living industry. He built one of the first freestanding assisted living communities in the state of Kansas, and he helped write regulations for an industry that didn't exist. And like many entrepreneurs, he bet the company's future on himself and heaped a ton of debt and leverage on it. He did this to fuel growth while maintaining control as a private, family-owned business. This was very important to him, as he never wanted anyone else deciding what is in the best interest of our residents. Because in apartment 406 was my sweet little grandmother, Mary Bickford, who was the first resident of the first Bickford over 30 years ago. What we did mattered. And so my dad wanted to protect that. And so he always told me the only way we're going public is if we're going bankrupt. And so my father's strategy was courageous and bold. Unfortunately, he also had a hankering for distributions. My father and a founding financial partner desired to distribute money out of the business. And I didn't fault him for that. My father deserved it. It just wasn't a wise strategy to be growing with significant leverage in a capital-intensive business that you have to put a lot of money in to keep your buildings looking like home, all while distributing large sums of money to the founding partners. And so while the organization, we were able to create a lot of value, we sacrificed underlying cash flow to do it, and essentially we were leveraging our assets to pay the bills. At one point in time, we were losing $6 million a year. And while this strategy is what got us started, it wasn't sustainable. So when the transfer to the second generation officially happened, my brothers and I embarked on a new business model, one that focused on transitioning the business to a more self-sustaining model. And in the years that followed, we pulled every lever that we knew how to pull, maximizing efficiencies, pushing performance, all those types of things. The one thing that we never touched was the care and services our residents were receiving. We made significant headway, but we hit a firestorm in the 2008 recession. Our lead bank went under and pulled our operating lines. We had a contractor who was working on multiple construction projects. They stopped paying their bills, and that stalled all of our growth. And our organization was in that significant negative cash flow position. Our organization was in a crippling position and on its knees. It was at this time that my hero of a father passed away from a 6-year journey fighting colon cancer. And like my father's entire life, he showed an amazing amount of grit and perseverance by setting the record for the most chemotherapy treatments at our local hospital, a record that no one wants to set. I gave the eulogy at his funeral, while in the fight of our lives to save the business he had championed for so many years. I told everyone how proud he would be of his sons continuing on his fighting spirit. Less than 60 days later, my brothers and I were in our lawyer's office talking about taking our company bankrupt, as we didn't have the cash necessary to make our rent and lease payments. For the first time in my life, I felt like a failure. I felt like a fraud. I was frozen in fear, not knowing what step to take next. How do we close the business down only 60 days after my father's death? But ultimately, with a lot of grit and some lucky breaks, we found our way through it. And I'm proud to say that all of our financial partners came out great as it relates to their investments in Bickford. Learning how to lead a purpose-driven organization while balancing the short-term needs of a business has been one hell of a journey. And the honest truth is that fear has been driving the bus of my leadership. But the fear of losing the business has created the urgency for us to create change and innovate, which in many ways has catapulted Bickford to being considered an industry leader today. And while I'd never choose the path we took to get here again, I am grateful for what it has taught me. It has taught me how to never stop moving forward in the face of adversity. I believe great businesses and great leaders are made in adversity, and I've been given a master's level education in this. These lessons I have learned as a business owner has strengthened me to carry the burden I am now meant to carry as a caregiver. The third phase of my life story that I'd like to share with you is the phase I'm in now, my identity as a caregiver. I want to clearly express that I am learning how to evolve and step into this identity, and it is very much in a state of becoming. This identity also coincides with the beginning of my Stagen journey. In the meeting module, it challenges us to create an organizational vision. And many of the inspiring visions we read about revolve around things of growth, financial performance, market share, and things like that. And as I set out to create a vision like that for Bickford, I felt a strong tension inside of me. None of this stuff mattered to a majority of my workforce who's a caregiver. Growth, financial outcomes are not their goal, and in fact, they would say it is these types of things that keeps them from doing that in which they love. So while I know that a compelling vision can be a powerful tool to inspire the hearts and minds of your people, I felt as though we at Bickford needed to set that aside for a moment. Because in many ways, as a leader, I don't know where we're going. I don't have that grand vision yet. But wherever it is, I want to travel there in a purposeful way. And when I started thinking like that, something inside of me lit up. I stopped thinking about who we're going to be in our future, and I started thinking about when we're at our best today, who are we? I wanted to better connect with our core identity. And I wanted to make a declaration to our people and to the world of who we are. And so it became evident that we needed to write our manifesto. So with the help of the mentors and the coaches in this room, we set out to write it. It was important for us to write it and not to outsource it, as we wanted it to come from our soul. We needed it to connect to the heart of a caregiver. For inside that caregiver is why we do what we do. And when we looked in the heart of our caregivers, deep in their core is love. And their life is about extending that love in the service of others. We created the manifesto to give the love in their heart a voice that the world needs to hear. And so what I'm about to share with you is their fierce, beautiful message of love and the manifesto of Bickford Senior Living. Enjoy. There is no higher calling. No greater purpose than that of a caregiver. Somehow, we've come to believe that caregiving is just for some of us and not all of us. Yet, at our core, we are all made to love, to connect, to extend ourselves in service of others. The question is, do we have the will to love, to do what it takes, to risk ourselves in caring, even when the burden is great? In times of happiness, in times of sadness, we are that caregiver, whatever it takes. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. You guys are actually the first audience who's ever seen that. We actually just finished it here this week. And I'm very proud of this. And this is the message. This is how we're going to communicate with the world. And there's some scenes in here that are super powerful to me, particularly the individual caregiver who has a covering on her head and she's lifting that lady into her bed. And the sheer physicality of that moment and the love in which she does it is breathtaking to me. And when we wrote the manifesto, we wrote it to connect with the heart of a caregiver. whether that caregiver was a nurse or the daughter of an aging parent. What I didn't realize is that the manifesto was awakening something inside of me. What this process has really done is awaken the caregiver inside of me. It is showing me that I need to infuse the love of a caregiver into all aspects of my work and life. It is teaching me how to lead the organization in love. And when I look back at the identities I've had in my life, I see how I was becoming prepared to become a caregiver. My time as an athlete, I learned how to care more than others think reasonable. Whatever the tasks I needed to do, I was willing and learning how to do what it takes. And while this is still a cornerstone of who I am, as a caregiver, I am learning to relate to the doing of my work differently. It's not about just getting the job done anymore. It's about how much love can I bring to whatever it is that I do. And are others able to feel that love by the way in which I do it? I want to share with you an excerpt from a speech that speaks from the heart of a caregiver. This speech comes from one of the greatest exemplars of love in modern history, Martin Luther King Jr. And as I say it, just watch what's going on the screen. If it falls on your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, "Here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well." If you can't be a pine at the top of a hill, be a shrub in the valley, be the best little shrub on the side of the hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. Learning to become a caregiver is teaching me how to access the love that is already inside of me and offering the quality of that love to whatever it is that I do. My time as a business owner, I learned how to carry the burden of the business and how to keep moving forward in the face of adversity. And while I still lean on these principles of grit and perseverance to carry me through difficult times, as a caregiver, I am learning to relate to how I carry the burden differently. I came across an old parable that is very meaningful to me, and it speaks to the burdens we carry as caregivers. And it goes like this. A young woman had searched everywhere for enlightenment, but could find no answer. Until one day, she saw an old man walking down a mountain path, carrying a heavy sack. Immediately, she sensed that this old man knew the secret she had desperately been seeking for many years. "Old man, please tell me what you know. What is enlightenment?" The old man smiled at her for a moment and then swung the heavy burden off his shoulders and stood up straight. "Yes, I see," cried the young lady, "my everlasting gratitude. But please, one question more. What is after enlightenment?" Smiling again, the old man picked up the sack, slung it over his shoulders, and continued on his way. And there is a beauty in how this old man relates to the burden he is carrying. So many times as business leaders, we grow weary of the burden we are carrying, the financial pressure, the struggle, the stress of payroll. We feel as though the burden shouldn't be there, and we want it just to go away. But as a caregiver, this is the burden I am meant to carry. It is molding me, shaping me, making me into the person I'm meant to become, into the leader my business deserves. The caregiver inside of me says, lean into that burden. Don't resist it. Be grateful for the opportunity. What a gift that you are here to carry it. Learn to love that burden and carry it as if you've chosen it. In the industry I am in, learning to embody the love of a caregiver allows me to better relate with the experiences of those I serve. Aging and all that comes with it can rock us to our core. In order to care deeply, you have to be willing to hurt. The price of admission is discomfort. As a caregiver, I need to let the world rock me to my core so that I will be able to rock the world to its core. I've had the opportunity to experience this with thousands of families we've served, but more importantly, I've experienced this in my own family's life. But the one thing I've learned is that there is a beauty in aging, as it awakens us to our need to express love now. Not tomorrow, now. I want to share with you a beautiful expression of this. It comes from a poet named M.Q., whom I met at the Conscious Capitalism Summit, and many of you are familiar with. He shared a poem about love that has had a deep impact on me. He presents love in a romantic context, which is beautiful, but I want to invite you to see more than that. See, I believe he is speaking from the heart of a caregiver, urging us to express love now. This poem, I believe, is a calling to awaken us to our need to express love now. For I believe at our core, we are all caregivers. We are caregivers to our families. We are caregivers to our relationships. We are caregivers for our businesses. And we are at our best when we're extending our love in the service of others. The trouble is, we think we have time. Aging and death teaches us that we are not guaranteed anything. There is a fragility in this world that we operate in. The people and the opportunities we hold so dear can and will be taken from us. This fragility should not cause us to recede in fear, but to expand ourselves in love with a fierce, urgent love. Leading with love is what we're all called to do. And that's why I feel the expansion of love happening with the people in this room, and that's why I have chosen to be a part of this community. And I want people to say about us that we cared the most, and we were willing to do whatever it takes. My challenge to you is that as you hear my story and the rest of the speakers share theirs, that you will become more awakened, more alive to your story. What are you being called to do? What is the contribution you are here to make? Are you aware of your need to express love now? Don't recede in fear and play small, thinking you have time. Even if you feel like you don't know your calling, even if you feel like you don't know your life purpose for the next 30 years figured out, infuse whatever it is you choose today with the fierce, urgent love of a caregiver. For if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Thank you.